I'm Margaret, 68 years old, and until recently, a retired elementary school teacher from Boston. What my daughter Stephanie didn't know was that I'd secretly won $15 million in the lottery months ago. When she told me I was too old to babysit my own grandchildren, something inside me snapped. 1 week later, I was on a plane to Europe with my fortune. She kept calling me frantically, but my lawyer Susan simply answered, "Margaret is living her best life now. She'll contact you when she's ready." Before I tell you how I completely changed my life at 68, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe if you believe it's never too late to start over. My life in Boston had been predictable but fulfilling. For 40 years, I taught 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary School, shaping young minds and watching generations of children grow. I loved teaching with every fiber of my being. The classroom was my second home, a place where I felt purposeful and alive. My students would often return years later, now adults, to thank me for the impact I had on their lives. Those moments made every challenging day worthwhile. My husband Richard and I had a beautiful 42-year marriage. He was a civil engineer, practical and methodical, the perfect balance to my more spontaneous nature. We met at a community fundraiser when we were in our 20s, and it was love at first sight. Richard had the kindest blue eyes and a laugh that could fill a room. He wasn't perfect, he could be stubborn, and he never did learn to cook anything beyond scrambled eggs, but he was perfect for me. When Richard passed from pancreatic cancer 3 years ago, I thought my world had ended. The cancer took him quickly, just 4 months from diagnosis to his final breath. I held his hand as he slipped away in our bedroom, surrounded by photos of our life together. The grief was overwhelming at first, a physical pain that seemed impossible to bear. But gradually, with support from friends and my faith, I learned to live with his absence. Though not a day passes that I don't think of him. Our daughter Stephanie was our only child, born after years of trying. Now 38, she married Trevor, a financial analyst, and they gave me 2 wonderful grandchildren, Emma, who's 8, and Jack, who's 5. Emma has my love of books and can read well beyond her grade level. Jack is a bundle of energy with Richard's analytical mind, always taking apart his toys to see how they work. After Richard died, my relationship with my grandchildren became my anchor. I would pick them up from school twice a week, helping with homework while Stephanie and Trevor worked late. Emma and I would read together, exploring everything from classic fairy tales to modern adventures. Jack and I built elaborate Lego structures and played imaginative games where ordinary household items became treasures on pirate ships or tools for space exploration. Our baking days were special traditions. I taught Emma how to make Richard's favorite chocolate chip cookies, measuring ingredients carefully and explaining how baking was really just delicious science. Jack preferred decorating, creating colorful frosting masterpieces on cupcakes that rarely resembled what he claimed they were, but were made with such enthusiasm that it didn't matter. My retirement routine was comfortable. Monday mornings I volunteered at the local library, helping with story time for toddlers. Wednesdays were for my garden club, where I specialized in growing heirloom tomatoes and roses. Fridays belonged to my book club, 6 women who had been meeting monthly for over 20 years. We discussed literature, yes, but also life, love, loss, and the peculiar challenges of aging in a world that often overlooks older women. Everything changed 6 months ago when I checked my lottery ticket at the corner store and nearly collapsed when the machine showed I'd won the $15 million jackpot. I stood there frozen, my hand shaking as I held the ticket. Mr. Patel, the store owner, noticed my reaction and quietly guided me to his back office before anyone else realized what had happened. "Mrs. Wilson, please sit down. Would you like some water?" he asked, concern evident in his eyes. I couldn't speak, just handed him the ticket. His eyes widened as he verified the numbers. "This is real," he whispered. "You must be very careful now." I decided immediately not to tell anyone, not even Stephanie, until I had figured out exactly what to do with this unexpected fortune. I wanted to be thoughtful, to make decisions that would honor Richard's memory and create security for my family. I imagined setting up college funds for Emma and Jack, helping Stephanie and Trevor pay off their mortgage, perhaps starting a scholarship fund in Richard's name at the local college. In those early weeks after the lottery win, life continued as normal on the surface. I still babysat my grandchildren, tended my garden, and met with my friends. But internally, I was making plans, consulting discreetly with financial advisors, and dreaming of ways to help my family while ensuring my own security. It was around this time that I began noticing subtle changes in Stephanie's behavior. Small comments about me slowing down or being a bit forgetful. Things I knew weren't true. At first, I dismissed these remarks, attributing them to Stephanie's stress from her demanding job as a marketing executive. But the comments persisted, becoming a recurring theme whenever we were together. "Mom, did you forget to give Jack his allergy medicine yesterday? He was sniffling all night," she'd say, though I knew I'd given it to him right after his afternoon snack as always. Or, "Mom, you seem tired lately. Are you sure watching the kids isn't too much for you?" These subtle digs were like paper cuts, individually minor, but collectively painful. Still, I brushed them aside, believing that my revelation about the lottery winnings would soon change everything. I planned to share the news at our upcoming family dinner, already imagining Stephanie's shocked expression and the children's excitement when I told them about the educational trips we could take together. Little did I know that life had other plans, and my lottery winnings would serve a purpose I never anticipated. The first real blow came on a Tuesday afternoon when I arrived at Stephanie's house to pick up the children as usual. I'd brought ingredients to make Richard's famous spaghetti sauce with them, a family recipe that had been passed down for generations. Emma had been asking to learn how to make it. Instead of the usual excited greetings, I found Beverly, Trevor's mother, already there in the kitchen with the children. "Oh, Mom," Stephanie said, feigning surprise. "Didn't you get my text? Beverly offered to take the kids today. I thought you could use the rest." I checked my phone. There was no text. "I didn't receive anything," I said, trying to keep disappointment from my voice. "Oh well, technology." Beverly laughed with a dismissive wave. "At our age, it gets harder to keep up with all these gadgets." Beverly was only 4 years older than me, but she spoke as if we were from different generations. She stood there in her expensive cardigan set, hair freshly colored and styled, looking like she just stepped out of a magazine for active seniors. "I brought the ingredients for Grandpa's spaghetti sauce," I said, addressing Emma and Jack directly. "We were going to cook together today, remember? We're making cookies with Grandma Beverly instead," Jack said, already elbow-deep in cookie dough. "She lets us eat the raw dough." "Which isn't very safe," I murmured, but no one seemed to hear me. This scene repeated itself the following week, and then again the week after. Each time, my babysitting day was canceled with flimsy excuses or forgotten text messages. Beverly seemed to be taking over my role, appearing more frequently at family gatherings and school events where I had once been the designated grandparent. The exclusion extended beyond childcare. Family movie nights happened without my knowledge. Weekend trips to the zoo or museum were planned without inviting me. I would learn about these outings after the fact, through Emma's innocent comments or photos posted on social media. "Grandma, why didn't you come to the aquarium with us and Grandma Beverly? The turtles were so cool," Emma asked during one of my increasingly rare visits. "I wasn't invited, sweetheart," I answered honestly, which led to an uncomfortable silence from Stephanie across the room. My weekly phone calls with my daughter grew shorter and more perfunctory. When I suggested activities with the grandchildren, Stephanie would find reasons why they wouldn't work out. The children seemed confused by my diminishing presence in their lives, and I caught Emma looking at me with concern during one visit, as if she sensed something was wrong but couldn't articulate it. One afternoon, I dropped by unexpectedly with a new book I thought Emma would enjoy. As I approached the front door, I overheard Stephanie on the phone through the open window. "I know, Lisa. It's getting difficult. Mom is just getting too old and unreliable to watch the kids regularly. Last week she fell asleep while they were doing homework. I'm worried about their safety, honestly." I stood frozen on the porch, book clutched to my chest. This was an outright lie. I had closed my eyes briefly while the children worked quietly at the kitchen table, but I wasn't asleep. I'd been keenly aware of their presence, listening to the scratch of pencils and Emma's occasional whispers helping her brother. The betrayal stung sharply. This wasn't about my capabilities at all, it was about a narrative Stephanie was creating, perhaps influenced by Beverly, who seemed eager to position herself as the preferred grandmother. I rang the doorbell instead of using my key as I normally would. When Stephanie answered, her face registered surprise and then something like guilt. Mom, I didn't know you were coming by today. Clearly, I said, my voice steady despite my churning emotions. Stephanie, we need to talk about what's going on. What do you mean? She asked, not quite meeting my eyes as she led me into the kitchen. You've been canceling our regular days together. The children are doing activities with Beverly that we used to do. And just now I heard you telling someone I fell asleep watching the kids, which isn't true. Stephanie's face flushed, but she didn't back down. Mom, I saw you. Your eyes were closed, your head was nodding. What was I supposed to think? You were supposed to trust me, I said quietly. I've raised a child. I've taught hundreds of children. I think I can handle watching my own grandchildren do homework. It's not just that, Stephanie continued, her voice taking on a patronizing tone that made my skin crawl. You forgot to lock the back door last time. You mixed up Emma's and Jack's backpacks. Little things, but they add up. I'm just concerned that you might not be sharp enough anymore to keep them safe. Each accusation felt like a small dagger. The back door had a tricky lock that even Trevor struggled with sometimes. And the backpacks had been switched by the children themselves during a game. I took a deep breath, pushing down the hurt and anger. I see. And have you discussed these concerns with me before making decisions about my role in the children's lives? I didn't want to hurt your feelings, Stephanie said, in a tone that suggested she was being considerate rather than cowardly. And yet here we are, I replied. Despite this confrontation, I still plan to reveal my lottery winnings at our upcoming Sunday dinner. Perhaps the news would shift the dynamic, showing Stephanie that I was not only capable, but now in a position to provide significant opportunities for her family. I left that day with a heavy heart, but clinging to hope that our relationship could still be salvaged. How wrong I was. Sunday dinner at Stephanie and Trevor's house had once been a highlight of my week. Now, as I parked my car in their driveway, I felt a sense of dread creeping up my spine. The white colonial with its perfect lawn and trimmed hedges suddenly seemed unwelcoming, like a stage set rather than a home. I dressed carefully in a blue cashmere sweater that Richard always said brought out my eyes, and I carried a homemade apple pie, Emma's favorite. Perhaps these small offerings would help ease the tension I'd felt growing between us. Beverly's silver Lexus was already parked in the driveway. Of course she would be here early, probably already ensconced in the kitchen, playing the perfect mother-in-law. I took a deep breath, plastered on a smile, and rang the doorbell. Trevor answered, his tall frame filling the doorway. He had kind eyes that reminded me of Richard sometimes, which made his recent distance all the more painful. Margaret, come in, he said, taking the pie from my hands. Everyone's in the living room. The formality stung. He used to call me Mom after their wedding, a gesture that had touched me deeply at the time. In the living room, Beverly sat in what used to be my usual armchair by the fireplace, a glass of white wine already in hand. She wore an expensive-looking silk blouse and tailored pants, jewelry glinting at her ears and throat. Stephanie sat beside her on the sofa, the two of them looking like allies in some unspoken campaign. Mom, you're here, Stephanie said, not getting up to greet me. We were just discussing the children's summer activities. Where are Emma and Jack? I asked, noticing their absence. They're upstairs playing video games, Trevor explained. We thought they could have some free time before dinner. This was another change. The grandchildren had always been part of our pre-dinner conversations, sharing stories about their week or showing me their latest art projects. Now they were sequestered away, as if my presence wasn't important enough to interrupt their game time. I'll just go up and say hello, I said, moving toward the stairs. Oh, let them play, Beverly interjected quickly. Jack just reached a new level he's been working on for days. You know how boys are with their games. I did know. I also knew that Jack would gladly pause his game to give me a hug, as he always had before. But challenging Beverly would only create more tension, so I reluctantly took a seat across from them. Wine, Margaret, Trevor offered, already pouring a glass without waiting for my response. Thank you, I said, accepting it and taking a small sip. So, what summer activities are you planning for the children? We're looking at Camp Pinewood for 3 weeks in July, Stephanie said. It's one of the top-rated camps in New England. Very structured with excellent supervision. That sounds lovely, I said carefully. I was thinking since I'm free all summer, I could take them for some weekdays. We could do our own day camps, library programs, the science museum, maybe even some short trips to the coast. The silence that followed was deafening. Stephanie and Beverly exchanged a look that made my stomach tighten. Mom, Stephanie finally said, her voice taking on that condescending tone I'd come to dread. You're 70 years old. You can't handle active kids all day. I'm 68, I corrected quietly. And I handled 30 active children at once for 40 years as a teacher. That was different, Beverly chimed in. You had support staff, structured activities. And that was years ago. I think what Stephanie means, Trevor said, clearly trying to mediate, is that professional childcare might be more appropriate for full days. The kids can be a handful. They've never been a handful for me, I pointed out, feeling my face grow warm. They're well-behaved children who I love spending time with. Well, that's sweet, Beverly said with a saccharine smile. But I've already told Stephanie and Trevor that I'm happy to take the children for the weeks they're not at camp. My neighborhood has a wonderful pool. And I've signed them up for tennis lessons at my club. The casual way she announced these plans, already finalized without any consideration of my role, sent a wave of hurt through me so intense I had to put down my wine glass for fear of spilling it. I see, I managed to say. It seems you've got it all worked out. We just want what's best for the kids, Stephanie said, as if this explained and excused everything. And you don't think their maternal grandmother is part of what's best for them? I asked directly. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Trevor shifted in his seat, looking like he wished he could disappear. Stephanie flushed but lifted her chin stubbornly. Of course you're important to them, Mom. But we have to be practical about what you can realistically handle at your age. My age, I repeated flatly. I'm not invalid or infirm, Stephanie. I'm in excellent health, I'm active, and I'm perfectly capable of caring for my grandchildren. No one's saying you're invalid, Trevor jumped in, ever the peacemaker. But kids today are different, more active, more demanding. Children haven't changed that much, I countered. What's changed is your perception of me. Beverly cleared her throat delicately. I think what they're trying to say, Margaret, is that as we get older we need to recognize our limitations. I know I couldn't possibly keep up with Jack for a full day without help, and I'm only 72. The conversation mercifully shifted when Trevor announced dinner was ready. As we moved to the dining room, I noticed how Beverly was given the seat at the end of the table opposite Trevor. The position I used to occupy as the family matriarch. I was seated along the side like an afterthought. The children finally joined us, and their genuine delight at seeing me was the only bright spot in an otherwise miserable evening. Emma showed me her new bracelet made of colorful rubber bands, while Jack excitedly told me about his video game accomplishments. But even these interactions were interrupted by Beverly's loud comments and Stephanie's constant redirection of the children's attention. As the meal progressed, I found myself becoming increasingly silent, observing the dynamics around the table. Beverly dominated the conversation, talking about the cruise she was planning for the whole family next year. A plan I was clearly hearing about for the first time. Stephanie and Trevor nodded along enthusiastically. I had come tonight planning to share my lottery news, to announce that I could provide opportunities for the family beyond what they'd ever imagined. But as I sat there, effectively invisible except when being talked down to, I realized something important. Money wouldn't fix this. No amount of financial support would change the fundamental lack of respect they were showing me. When Trevor brought out dessert store-bought cheesecake rather than my homemade apple pie, which sat forgotten on the kitchen counter, I made my excuses. I think I'll head home, I said, standing up. I'm feeling a bit tired. See, Beverly said immediately. This is exactly what we mean. You get tired so easily now. I looked at her coolly. Actually, Beverly, I'm tired of this situation, not physically exhausted. There's a difference. I kissed my grandchildren goodbye, promising to call them soon, and left without waiting for Stephanie to walk me out as she normally would. As I drove home, the weight of what had happened settled over me. My own daughter had systematically pushed me out of my grandchildren's lives, treating me as if I were incompetent based solely on my age. The lottery ticket sat in my purse, still unclaimed. As I pulled into my driveway, I made a decision. If they didn't value me as I was, they wouldn't value me for my money either. Whatever I did next would be for myself alone. The next morning, I called my longtime friend Dorothy. We taught together at Lincoln Elementary for 30 years, and she knew me better than almost anyone. If I was truly showing signs of decline that I wasn't aware of, Dorothy would tell me honestly. "Margaret, what's wrong? You sound upset," Dorothy said as soon as she heard my voice. I poured out everything that had happened, from the gradual exclusion to the humiliating dinner. Dorothy listened without interrupting, a skill she perfected during her years as a guidance counselor. "And the worst part is," I concluded, "I'm starting to question myself. Am I really slipping and not noticing?" There was a long pause on the line. "Margaret," Dorothy finally said, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "there's something you should know. Stephanie called me about 3 weeks ago." My stomach dropped. "What did she say?" "She asked if I'd noticed any changes in your behavior or memory. She said she was concerned you were showing early signs of dementia and wanted to know if I'd seen evidence of it." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her she was absolutely wrong," Dorothy said firmly. "I said you're as sharp as ever, and that I see you nearly every day at our various activities." I asked what made her think that, and she gave vague examples that sounded like normal senior moments anyone could have, misplacing keys, forgetting an appointment. Things that happen to people of any age. "She's been building a case," I said, the realization dawning on me. "Creating a narrative where I'm incompetent." "It seems that way," Dorothy agreed. "And I hate to say this, but it might be about your house." My house, the beautiful 4-bedroom colonial that Richard and I had bought 30 years ago. Now worth well over $1 million in Boston's expensive real estate market. The house that was fully paid off, thanks to Richard's careful financial planning. "You think they want me to sell it?" I asked. "Or worse, they're preparing to suggest you're not capable of living independently." Beverly mentioned something to Catherine at Bridge Club about how some living arrangements might be changing soon. Catherine was another retired teacher who played bridge with Beverly's circle. The thought that they were discussing my living situation without my knowledge sent a chill through me. "I need to know if there's anything actually wrong with me," I said firmly. "I'm going to see Dr. Anderson today." Dr. Anderson had been my physician for 20 years. She agreed to see me on short notice, and I underwent a thorough cognitive assessment along with my regular physical. The results were clear. I was in excellent health for my age, with no signs of cognitive decline whatsoever. "Your blood pressure is that of a 50-year-old, Margaret, Dr. Anderson said, reviewing my results. "Your memory tests are perfect. Whatever concerns your family has expressed, they're not based in medical reality." Armed with this knowledge, I decided to confront Stephanie directly. I drove to her house the next day, timing my visit for when I knew Trevor would be at work. This conversation needed to be between mother and daughter. Stephanie seemed surprised when she opened the door to find me standing there. "Mom? I wasn't expecting you." "Clearly," I said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk, Stephanie." Without interruptions or excuses. In her kitchen, the scene of so many happy family gatherings in the past, I faced my daughter across the island counter. "I spoke with Dorothy yesterday," I began, watching her face carefully. "She told me you called her asking if I was showing signs of dementia." Stephanie's face flushed, but she didn't deny it. "I was concerned, Mom." That's what responsible adult children do. They look out for their aging parents. "And did it occur to you to discuss these concerns with me directly? Or to accompany me to a doctor's appointment if you were truly worried about my health?" "You wouldn't have been objective," she said dismissively. "No one thinks they're declining." "Well, I saw Dr. Anderson yesterday," I continued. "She gave me a complete physical and cognitive evaluation. Would you like to know the results?" Stephanie's expression wavered between defiance and uncertainty. "What did she say?" "She said I'm in perfect health, with no signs whatsoever of cognitive decline. My blood pressure is excellent, my reflexes are strong, and my memory tests were perfect." "Tests can miss things," Stephanie said weakly. "Stop it," I said, my voice sharp enough that she actually flinched. This isn't about my health and we both know it. This is about you and Beverly deciding I'm inconvenient. This is about pushing me aside because it's easier than including me. That's not fair, Stephanie protested. No, what's not fair is telling me I'm too old to babysit my own grandchildren. What's not fair is discussing selling my house, for my own good behind my back. Her eyes widened at this. How did you know about that? So it's true, I said, the confirmation worse than I'd expected. You've been planning to push me into some kind of assisted living arrangement. It was just a discussion, Stephanie said defensively. Trevor's parents know about a really nice community near them. Beverly thought it might be good for you to be closer to us, in a place with support services. A place where I wouldn't be in the way, I corrected. A place where you could visit occasionally to ease your conscience, while Beverly plays grandmother to my grandchildren. Mom, you need to accept your limitations, Stephanie said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone again. It's not safe for you to live alone in that big house. It's not safe for you to be solely responsible for active children. Not safe according to whom? Not my doctor. Not me. Just you and Beverly. Trevor agrees with us, she added, as if her husband's opinion settled the matter. I'm sure he does, when the alternative is standing up to his mother and his wife. Stephanie's face hardened. I'm trying to do what's best for everyone. No, you're doing what's easiest for you, I countered. The truth is, you've decided I'm too old to be useful or relevant. You've decided my role in your life and my grandchildren's lives should be minimized. And rather than being honest about it, you've created this fiction about me being incompetent. That's not true. It is true. And here's what you don't know, Stephanie. I've been making my own plans that don't include being pushed aside or treated like a burden. What plans? She asked, suddenly wary. That's no longer your concern, I said, gathering my purse. You've made it very clear that my life is my own business, as yours is yours. I'm simply respecting that boundary. As I walked to the door, Stephanie called after me. Mom, you're overreacting. We can talk about this. I turned back to look at her one last time. We just did talk about it. And now I'm going to do something about it. Walking out of that house, I felt a strange mixture of heartbreak and liberation. The daughter I'd raised, the family I'd loved, had effectively pushed me out of their lives. But in doing so, they'd unknowingly pushed me toward a decision that would change everything. The next morning, I called the lottery commission and scheduled an appointment to claim my prize. Unlike some states, Massachusetts allows lottery winners to remain anonymous, a provision I was immensely grateful for now. I didn't want Stephanie or Beverly to learn about my windfall through a news announcement. The lottery office was in a nondescript government building in downtown Boston. I dressed conservatively in a simple navy pantsuit, wanting to attract as little attention as possible. The officials were professional and discreet, walking me through the process with efficiency. Ms. Wilson, you've chosen to take the lump sum payment rather than the annuity, is that correct? The lottery representative asked. Yes, I confirmed. After taxes, that will be approximately $8.4 million. That's correct. Your financial advisor is here to assist with the transfer. Thomas Jenkins, a financial advisor recommended by my bank, had accompanied me to the meeting. In his 60s himself, Thomas had a calming presence and had quickly understood my situation when I explained it to him during our preliminary meeting. We've set up the accounts as discussed, Thomas explained. The majority will go into a diversified portfolio of investments, with a portion set aside in liquid assets for immediate use. After signing numerous documents and providing multiple forms of identification, it was done. I was officially a millionaire. The knowledge gave me no particular joy, just a sense of security and possibility. Money couldn't heal the rift with my daughter, but it could give me options I wouldn't otherwise have had. From the lottery office, Thomas and I went directly to the office of Susan Blackwell, an attorney specializing in estate planning and elder law. Susan was a formidable woman in her 50s with a reputation for protecting her clients' interests fiercely. Mrs. Wilson, Mr. Jenkins has briefed me on your situation, Susan said after we were settled in her office. I understand you want to protect your assets and create clear guidelines for their distribution. That's right, I confirmed. I want to ensure my estate is handled according to my wishes, not according to what others might think is best for me. Over the next 2 hours, we drafted a comprehensive estate plan. The bulk of my estate would eventually go to my grandchildren through trusts that would mature when they reached 25, with provisions for education expenses before that. Stephanie and Trevor would receive a modest inheritance, conditional upon their treatment of me in my remaining years. I want to be clear, I told Susan. This isn't about revenge or punishment. But I won't reward the kind of disrespect and manipulation I've experienced recently. I understand completely, Susan assured me. We'll create conditions that encourage respectful behavior without being punitive. And most importantly, we'll ensure that you maintain complete control over your assets while you're alive. We also discussed my immediate plans, which were taking shape rapidly in my mind. I want to move to Europe, I said, the decision feeling more right every time I voiced it. Specifically to Spain. Richard and I visited Barcelona once and I fell in love with the country. The climate, the culture, the pace of life, it all appeals to me. Susan nodded. Many retirees find Europe attractive, especially with the current exchange rate. Property in coastal Spain can be quite reasonable compared to Boston. I'll need your help with the legal aspects of living abroad, I continued. Visa requirements, property purchase, tax implications. Of course. I have colleagues who specialize in international relocations for retirees. I'll put you in touch with them immediately. As I left Susan's office, I felt lighter than I had in months. For the first time since Richard's death, I was making bold decisions about my own life rather than organizing it around others' needs and expectations. That evening, I began researching Spanish coastal towns. The internet made it remarkably easy to explore options from my living room. I was drawn to the Costa Brava region in Catalonia, with its beautiful beaches and proximity to Barcelona. The town of Biguer, with its medieval castle and stunning coves, particularly caught my attention. Over the next week, I threw myself into preparations. I enrolled in an intensive Spanish language course, studying vocabulary and practicing pronunciation for hours each day. I contacted real estate agents in Spain and began virtual tours of properties. I researched visa requirements and healthcare options for American expatriates. Dorothy was the only person I confided in fully about my plans and my lottery win. Good for you, Margaret, she said over coffee in my kitchen. I've watched you shrink yourself to accommodate Stephanie's life for years. It's time you lived for yourself. You don't think I'm being selfish? I asked, still wrestling with maternal guilt despite everything. Selfish? After raising her, supporting her through college, being available whenever she needed you? After watching her push you aside when you became inconvenient? No, Margaret, I don't think you're being selfish. I think you're finally being self-respecting. Dorothy promised to visit me in Spain, and we made plans for regular video calls to stay connected. Her support strengthened my resolve. Within 3 weeks, I had found a beautiful villa in Biguer, a 3-bedroom house with a terrace overlooking the Mediterranean. The previous owners, an elderly British couple returning to England to be near their children, had maintained it beautifully. The price, while substantial, was well within my new means. I made an offer immediately, and it was accepted the next day. Susan's international colleagues handled the legal aspects flawlessly, and within a month the house was mine. Meanwhile, I quietly prepared to sell my Boston home. I hired a discreet real estate agent who understood my desire for privacy, and we prepared the house for listing without putting up a sign that would alert neighbors or family. Sorting through 40 years of possessions was both painful and liberating. I kept family photos, Richard's watch and wedding ring, and select mementos that held genuine sentimental value. Everything else, furniture, housewares, clothes I no longer wore, I donated or sold. As the date of my departure approached, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Sadness at the rift with Stephanie, worry about my relationship with my grandchildren, but also a growing excitement about this new chapter of my life. At 68, I was embarking on an adventure many people half my age would find daunting. The night before my flight, Dorothy came over to help with final preparations and to drive me to the airport the next day. We shared a bottle of wine on my nearly empty back porch, watching the sunset over the neighborhood I was leaving behind. Have you decided how you'll tell Stephanie? Dorothy asked. Susan will contact her once I'm settled in Spain, I explained. I've written a letter explaining my decision, but not mentioning the lottery. That information will only come out if necessary. She'll be shocked, Dorothy said. They all will be. Yes, I agreed. But perhaps it will make them reconsider their assumptions about what a 68-year-old woman is capable of. We clinked glasses to that, and as the sky darkened, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. This wasn't the future I had imagined, but it was a future I was choosing for myself, with courage and hope. The morning of my departure dawned bright and clear, as if Boston were giving me a beautiful goodbye. Dorothy arrived early, helping me load my remaining luggage into her car. I'd shipped most of my belongings ahead, but carried with me the irreplaceable items: photo albums, Richard's wedding ring on a chain around my neck, and a small wooden box containing letters he had written me during our courtship. Standing in the empty foyer of my home for the last time was surreal. Every corner held memories. Richard carrying me over the threshold as newlyweds, Stephanie taking her first steps across this very floor, family Christmases and Thanksgivings, quiet evenings reading by the fireplace. Ready? Dorothy asked gently from the doorway. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. With one last look around, I closed the door on that chapter of my life. The drive to Logan Airport was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts. At the international terminal, Dorothy hugged me fiercely. Call me when you land, she insisted. And remember, you can always come back if it doesn't work out. I know, I said, though in my heart, I had no intention of returning to a life where I was marginalized and dismissed. Thank you for everything, Dorothy. Go live gloriously, she said, wiping away a tear. Show them all what 68 can look like. The flight to Barcelona was long but comfortable in the business class seat I'd allowed myself as a one-time luxury. I watched movies, dozed, and reviewed Spanish phrases, trying not to dwell on what I was leaving behind but focusing instead on what lay ahead. From Barcelona, I took a private car to Biguer, watching through the window as the landscape changed from urban sprawl to countryside and finally to the stunning Costa Brava coastline. When we rounded the final curve and I caught my first glimpse of my new town, with its medieval castle perched on the hill and the Mediterranean sparkling beyond, I gasped audibly. Yes, hermoso, verdad? The driver asked. It's beautiful, isn't it? Sí, muy hermoso, I replied, using my newly learned Spanish. The simple exchange filled me with disproportionate pride. This was the first of many new experiences awaiting me. My villa exceeded the expectations set by virtual tours. Perched on a hillside with unobstructed views of the sea, it featured a terrace with flowering vines, a small but well-maintained garden, and interiors that blended traditional Spanish elements with modern comforts. The previous owners had left much of their furniture, which suited me perfectly. That first night, I sat on my terrace with a glass of local wine, watching the sunset paint the Mediterranean in shades of gold and pink. The air was scented with jasmine and salt, and from somewhere nearby, I could hear the gentle strumming of a guitar. Despite the emotional tumult of the past weeks, in that moment, I felt a profound sense of rightness. Back in Boston, the consequences of my departure were unfolding. As instructed, the real estate agent had waited until I was safely out of the country before formally listing my house. The for sale sign went up the day after I left. According to Dorothy, who called me with updates, the neighborhood was buzzing with the news. My next-door neighbor Martha had called Stephanie immediately, concerned about my unexplained absence and the sudden sale. Stephanie had apparently arrived at the house in a panic, only to find it empty and on the market. Her calls to my cell phone went straight to voicemail, as I changed to a Spanish number upon arrival. Her increasingly frantic messages to Dorothy were met with vague reassurances that I was fine but unavailable. After 3 days of failed attempts to contact me, Stephanie finally reached out to Susan Blackwell, whose contact information I'd left in a sealed envelope on the mantel, addressed to my daughter. Susan, true to her professional commitment, called me first to confirm I was ready for her to speak with Stephanie. She's quite upset, Susan reported. She's been calling my office every hour since she found my card. I'm ready, I confirmed. You can tell her what we discussed. According to Susan's later account, the conversation went exactly as planned. Ms. Wilson, I'm Susan Blackwell, your mother's attorney, she began when Stephanie called yet again. Where is my mother? Stephanie demanded. What's happened to her? Margaret asked me to inform you that she's living happily in Europe, Susan said calmly. She'll contact you when she's ready. And no, she doesn't need your help managing her finances or making her decisions. Europe? What are you talking about? My mother can't just move to Europe. I assure you she can and she has, Susan replied. She's of sound mind and body as confirmed by her physician, and fully capable of making her own life choices. This is ridiculous, Stephanie sputtered. She can't speak any foreign languages. She doesn't know anyone there. She's never lived anywhere but Boston. Your mother is more capable than you've given her credit for, Susan said. She's learning Spanish quite successfully and has already made connections in her new community. I need to speak to her, Stephanie insisted. This is clearly some kind of crisis or breakdown. Margaret will contact you when she's ready, Susan repeated firmly. In the meantime, I suggest you respect her wishes and her privacy. The conversation ended with Stephanie threatening to file a missing persons report, which Susan calmly pointed out would be fruitless since I had left the country legally and of my own free will, and had explicitly informed my attorney of my whereabouts. In the weeks that followed, Stephanie made repeated attempts to discover my location. She called Dorothy daily, pleaded with Susan, and even contacted my bank, where she was politely but firmly rebuffed due to privacy regulations. What finally broke the stalemate was a postcard I sent to Emma and Jack. I couldn't bear the thought of my grandchildren believing I had abandoned them without a word. The card, featuring a beautiful view of the Mediterranean, contained a simple message. Dear Emma and Jack, Grandma is living in a new place called Spain. It's across the ocean and it's very beautiful here. I miss you both and think of you every day. I will call you soon. All my love, Grandma. According to Dorothy, who heard the story from our mutual friend whose daughter taught at Emma's school, the postcard caused quite a stir. Emma had brought it to school for show and tell, proudly announcing that her grandmother had moved to Spain and was having an adventure. This public revelation forced Stephanie to acknowledge the truth of my departure, though she apparently crafted a narrative about me taking an extended vacation, rather than a permanent move. Meanwhile, I was settling into my new life with surprising ease. My intensive Spanish lessons continued, and I found the locals patient with my efforts. I joined an expatriate social group, meeting other retirees from Britain, Germany, and even a few fellow Americans. I explored my new town, discovering favorite cafes, shops, and walking paths along the stunning coastline. 2 months after my arrival, I established the Margaret Wilson Foundation, a small charity focused on providing educational opportunities for local children. Using a portion of my lottery winnings, I funded scholarships, after-school programs, and cultural exchanges. The work gave me purpose and quickly integrated me into the community in a meaningful way. It was around this time that Beverly, through her social connections, somehow learned about my lottery win. Dorothy called to warn me, barely containing her amusement as she relayed the story. Apparently, one of Beverly's bridge club friends has a sister who works at the bank where you initially deposited your winnings, Dorothy explained. The sister didn't handle your account directly, but heard rumors about a local teacher winning big. When your name came up in conversation, she put 2 and 2 together. And now Beverly knows, I said, imagining her reaction. Oh, Margaret, I wish you could have seen it. Catherine was at the bridge club when Beverly got the call from Trevor. She said Beverly turned white as a sheet, then red as a tomato. She kept repeating, 15 million? Margaret won $15 million. The news traveled quickly from Beverly to Stephanie and Trevor. Within hours, my phone was ringing with a call from a number I didn't recognize. Sensing who it might be, I let it go to voicemail. Sure enough, it was Stephanie, her voice a mixture of confusion and barely contained desperation. Mom, it's Stephanie. We need to talk. There are rumors. Please call me back. I didn't. Instead, I continued with my day, volunteering at a local school in the morning, and meeting with new friends for lunch at a seaside cafe. The weight of family drama felt distant here, replaced by the simple pleasures of my new life. Stephanie's calls continued daily, growing increasingly urgent. I listened to each message but wasn't yet ready to respond. I needed time to process my own feelings and to establish my new life firmly before re-engaging with the family that had pushed me away. Finally, after a week of unanswered calls, Stephanie tried a different approach. She sent an email, more humble than any communication I'd received from her in years. "Dear Mom," it began. "I understand why you're not answering my calls. I wouldn't answer either if I were you. I've had a lot of time to think about how we treated you and I'm deeply ashamed. The things I said, the way I excluded you from our lives, it was wrong. I let Beverly influence me too much, and I prioritized what was convenient over what was right. I miss you, and more importantly, Emma and Jack miss you terribly. Would you consider talking to them, even if you're not ready to talk to me? Whatever you decide about your life going forward, please don't cut them out of it. They love their grandma. So do I, even if I've done a terrible job of showing it." The email moved me, but I remained cautious. Was this genuine remorse, or was it motivated by knowledge of my newfound wealth? I decided to test the waters carefully, starting with a video call with just my grandchildren. 6 months after my arrival in Spain, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. My Spanish had improved dramatically, allowing me to engage more deeply with local culture and build genuine friendships with my neighbors. My small villa had become a true home, filled with new memories and personal touches that reflected this chapter of my life. The Margaret Wilson Foundation was thriving, providing educational support to dozens of local children. I spent 3 mornings a week at the community center we'd established, helping with English lessons and art programs. The children's enthusiasm and the gratitude of their parents gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since retiring from teaching. My social circle had expanded beyond the expatriate community to include local families, particularly those involved with the foundation. I'd been welcomed into their homes for meals and celebrations, gradually becoming part of the fabric of this small coastal town. Most importantly, I'd rediscovered a sense of self that had been slowly eroded during those final months in Boston. Here, nobody saw me as just an aging grandmother whose value was diminishing with each passing year. I was Margaret, engaged, capable, and respected for my contributions. The healing of my relationship with Stephanie and her family had been a slower, more complicated process. After my initial video call with Emma and Jack, which was filled with excited questions about Spain and promises to visit, I gradually allowed Stephanie back into communication. Our first direct conversation was strained, with unspoken tensions hovering beneath surface pleasantries. But as weeks passed and our calls continued, we slowly began to address the elephant in the room. "I've been seeing a therapist," Stephanie admitted during one call. "I needed to understand why I treated you the way I did." "And what have you learned?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "That I was projecting my own fears about aging onto you," she said, "and that I let Beverly manipulate me because it was easier than standing up to her. She's always been intimidating, and she played on my insecurities as a mother." These insights seemed genuine, and over time, I began to see consistent changes in Stephanie's behavior. She stopped using condescending tones, listened more than she spoke, and explicitly acknowledged my right to make my own choices. A major breakthrough came when Stephanie finally confronted Beverly about her manipulation. "It didn't go well," Stephanie reported afterward. "She denied everything and accused me of choosing you over family unity. Trevor had to step in when she started crying about how unappreciated she feels." "That couldn't have been easy," I acknowledged. "It wasn't," Stephanie agreed. "But it was necessary. Trevor and I have decided to set clearer boundaries with his parents. We're taking a break from Sunday dinners for a while." This willingness to make difficult changes suggested that Stephanie's remorse was genuine, not merely motivated by my financial situation, which, importantly, we hadn't discussed directly until she brought it up herself. "Mom, about the lottery," she said hesitantly during a call about 3 months after our reconnection. "I want you to know that's not why I'm trying to repair our relationship. Whether you had $15 or $15 million, what I did was wrong." "I believe you," I said, and somewhat to my surprise I did. "But I want to be clear about something, Stephanie. My money is my own to use as I see fit. I've made provisions for Emma and Jack's education and future, But I won't be bankrolling luxury purchases or solving financial problems created by poor choices. I understand completely, she said. And honestly, we don't need your money. Trevor and I are doing well financially. What I need is my mother back in my life. As spring arrived in Spain, bringing even more vibrant colors to my garden and warmer days for seaside walks, we began planning the family's first visit. Stephanie, Trevor, Emma, and Jack would come for 2 weeks in July, staying in a rental house nearby rather than with me, a boundary I had insisted upon and they had respected. In preparation for their visit, I began family therapy sessions via video call with a counselor who specialized in intergenerational conflicts. These sessions helped establish ground rules for our reunion and provided a neutral space to address lingering hurts and expectations. I need acknowledgement that I am capable and autonomous, I stated clearly during one session. No checking if I've taken my medications or questioning if activities are too strenuous for me. That's completely fair, Stephanie agreed. And I need to know that you're open to rebuilding trust, even though it will take time. These sessions weren't always comfortable, but they laid important groundwork for a healthier relationship moving forward. When July finally arrived and I stood at Barcelona airport waiting for their flight to land, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: excitement, anxiety, hope, and lingering caution. But when Emma and Jack spotted me and ran ahead of their parents, throwing themselves into my arms with unrestrained joy, many of my concerns melted away. "Grandma, your house has a castle view," Emma exclaimed, referring to the photos I'd sent. "And you can see the ocean from your garden," Jack added. "Can we go swimming today?" Stephanie and Trevor approached more slowly, their faces a mixture of nervousness and relief. The hug Stephanie and I shared was tentative at first, then tightened into something more genuine. "Thank you for letting us come," she whispered. The 2 weeks that followed were transformative for our family. We established new patterns of interaction based on mutual respect rather than assumed authority. Stephanie and Trevor witnessed firsthand the full, engaged life I had created for myself, meeting my friends and seeing my work with the foundation. "You're thriving here," Trevor observed one evening as we sat on my terrace watching the sunset. "I've never seen you so vibrant." "Having the freedom to define my own life has been powerful," I replied. "When you're constantly told what you can't do because of your age, you start to believe it. Here, I'm defined by what I contribute, not by how many years I've lived." On their final evening in Spain, as we shared a meal at my favorite local restaurant, Stephanie raised her glass in a toast. "To my mother," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "who taught me the most important lesson of all. That it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to begin again, and to create a life that honors who you truly are." "I'm so sorry for what happened, Mom, and so grateful for this second chance." As we clinked glasses, I felt a sense of completion. The pain hadn't been erased, but it had been transformed into something valuable. A powerful lesson for all of us about respect, autonomy, and the danger of making assumptions based on age. After they returned to Boston, our relationship continued to evolve in positive ways. Weekly video calls became a cherished routine, with Emma and Jack eager to share their activities and hear about my life in Spain. Stephanie and I developed a new closeness, more like friends than mother and daughter, each respecting the other's independence while maintaining connection. When Dorothy finally visited in the fall, she marveled at the change in me. "You're a different person, Margaret," she said as we walked along the beach one morning. "You have this confidence, this presence that wasn't there before." "I found my voice," I replied simply. "And in finding it, I found myself again." The greatest gift of this difficult journey was the realization that we are never too old to start over, to demand respect, to create boundaries, and to build a life that reflects our true worth. My lottery winnings provided the means, but the courage to make the change came from within, from the part of me that refused to be diminished by others' limitations. As I look out at the Mediterranean from my terrace each evening, I feel profound gratitude for this unexpected chapter of my life. What began as heartbreak transformed into liberation. What seemed like an ending became a beginning. The greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to begin again, no matter our age. Respect isn't optional in relationships. It's essential. And sometimes the most powerful thing we can do when others try to make us small is to show them just how big our lives can be. Have you ever had to reinvent yourself later in life? Or stand up to family members who underestimated you? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to start over. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your next chapter could be your most beautiful one yet.